This is another story from Have I Told Y'all This? And my name is Nelda Spell Mitchell. I put together these stories into one big book, and I'll show you it's that big. And my sweet daughter, my granddaughter, helped me put it together. We cut it into two books, and if you want to give somebody a present that they've never had before, you look on Amazon and you order both books. You have to get both of them. Have I Told Y'all This by Nelda Spell Mitchell. Right now I'm going to read you another story about myself when I stuck a nail all the way through my foot. Oh my goodness, my foot. Oh dear Lord, help me. Had lightning struck, there was an instant queasiness in the pit of my stomach. Of course, I quit running when I realized that an old board was slowly slowing me down and was the source of my pain. Not wanting the others who were with me to know I was hurt, I quickly reached down to pull the board from my shoe. It didn't pull off easily. A rusty spike nail in the board had penetrated my shoe and had gone all the way through the instep of my right foot except for the skin on top. Thank goodness it was spring and I had on sandals. I unbuckled my sandal and pulled my foot up first, then pulled up the sandal, and blood was leaving a telltale sign that I was hurt. I tried to hurry and put my shoe on so no one would know my injury. Even though I was only 5 years old, I was tough. I knew I'd rather suffer from the physical distress in solitude than to receive medical help from well-meaning persecutors. I never had figured out why the Apostle Paul didn't write some soothing, loving, comforting epistles. Why did they all have to be exhortations? I knew Mother would be ready to read me several of Paul's epistles. She had them all memorized and could quote her favorite ones from memory, even though she always said she was reading them. Sure enough, the sight of blood activated the hearts, minds, souls, and vocal cords of all who were present. Dot and Josephine Speed, who were my age, ran to alert our parents of my misfortune. My sisters began their own version of epistles. Don't wipe your hands on your dress, you'll get blood on it. You already have, you crazy. Don't you know that blood will ruin it? Now just look at you. You got blood on your new sandals. They've got to last all summer, you know. What did you do that for? Are you stupid or something? Anybody would have to be blind not to see a nail that big. Look there. Couldn't you see that? You're gonna get the lockjaw. Won't you look funny when you can't open your mouth? Yeah, you won't even be able to eat. I just wanted them to vanish, mouth first. Throb was what my foot was doing now, and I wanted to cry, but I knew better. There were several appropriate epistles for crying Toogie babies. I didn't feel like hearing them now. I said that my foot didn't hurt much and would be fine in a few minutes. Why did they have to tell Mother anyway? I hope no one would see the blue bulge on the top of my foot where the nail almost came through. Well, it was a Sunday afternoon. Daddy, Mother, my sisters, Oline, Vivian Eve, and Jane, and I. Our youngest sister, Eloise, was due to be born that July, but she was still in the land of Nod. But the rest of us had been to see Granny Graves over at the Hebron community in Jones County, 7 miles away. On our way home, we had stopped by to see our good friends, Ben and Lily Mae Speed, and their children, Becky, Jeff, Dot, and Josephine. And their youngest child, Evangeline, was still in the land of Nod. That's Mother said she had been when she was born a few years later. Well, Mr. Ben was in the process of tearing down his grandfather's old house that stood just around a curve in the dirt road. While the older folks sat around lamenting about the scarcity of sugar and automobile tires, we rambunctious youngsters wanted to play on the floor joist of the partly dismantled old house. Mr. Ben's permissive tone of voice let us know that we were welcome to play anywhere we wanted to, but all he said was, "Hey, law, you young'uns get out from here." Daddy spat a long, snuffy stream, wiped the corners of his mouth with the top of his bent wrist, and said, "Ma, them young'uns gonna get killed." Miss Lily Mae was already wringing her hands. "Ben, those children might step on a nail. You children don't get on those stacked boards." Daddy spitting and wiping again. "Them young'uns ain't got no business of playing." Mr. Ben said, Eli, let 'em play. You work them little old gals too hard. They need to have a little fun." Mr. Ben always called my daddy Eli. He said it was because Daddy was always good, but Daddy's real name was Olin. The word fun hit Mother's sermonistic nerve. She instantaneously forgot about the present situation as she pointed her Arcola finger, doop, 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 like that, and have the last word. Arcola was her mother's mother, and she was sweet. But sometimes, oh well, that's another story. Anyway, she said, "I'll tell you right now, Ben Speed, work never did hurt anybody. I'm not about to wait on a house full of little lazy girls. If they can't get out and help their mammy make a living while their pa's off of working, they can find out what the razor strop feels like. There's no idle bread to be eaten at my house. And I guarantee you one thing, anybody that's under my roof is going to work. I'm not fixing to wait on 5 gals or Joe either." Joe was my only brother. Since he had been big enough to reach the gas pedal on Pa's old 38 Ford sedan, he had the only pleasant chore, which was driving our Grandpa Spell to the Sacred Harp Sings on Sunday. Sacred Harps, where they sang by the note. When Mother finally had to swallow, Mr. Ben got a chance to ask Daddy about his carpentry work at Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Daddy was home for the weekend, would have to leave that night to go back, Daddy got started on a long tale about the hood flying off his pickup when he was driving down Lookout Mountain and other adventures. As his story continued, we kids had melted into the hedge bushes around the yard until we were out of sight. Then we ran like wild Indians to the remnants of the old house. We didn't play on the stacks of lumber, but a board had been left upside down across the floor joist with a 100-year-old rusty square spike nail waiting for me. Now, I was swept along in a frenzy to the Speeds' house. Dot and Josephine were crying sympathetic tears. My sisters were still reciting reprimands. Sure enough, Mother read me her version of epistles. Don't you know that nobody's got time to carry you to the doctor? It will cost at least $5, not to mention the gasoline. And just look at your dress. That dress cost 50 cents. I told you not to wear your Sunday dress. And just look there. You've got blood dripping on their porch. Get out in the yard. We told you not to step on a nail. If you had done what you were told to, none of this would have happened. Now look, just you look at your shoe. It's ruined. Well, you just have to wear it. You'll probably have blood poison. We sure can't afford a hospital bill. Why, Mr. Camp Rogers died not long ago from blood poison, and he only had a tooth pulled. Mr. Ben, still calmly seated, said, Hello, Eller. You stepped on nails before yourself. Miss Lily Mae's emotions were wringing her hands into knots. She said, Ella, I wouldn't let my dress touch my back till I had that child in the doctor's office. Well, someone found a suitable cloth to wrap around my foot so the dripping blood wouldn't mess up the car before we drove the 2 miles on to our house. It was the 1st of April, 1944. Mother put me in a straight chair beside the fireplace. Spring nights were cool and the fire felt good. She told me to let my foot bleed as much as it would while she was helping to milk the cows. I had heard about repenting in sackcloth and ashes, and I wished for some sackcloth and ashes, even though I didn't really want ashes on my head. I was sorry that someone was having to do my night chores. Then Mother had to miss Sunday night services at church to stay home with me. I told her I'd be all right by myself, but she said no. Mother got an empty gallon molasses can, filled it half full of wool cloth scraps, and set them on fire. Now, wool doesn't blaze up, it just smolders, giving off a faint smoke. She put my foot on top of the bucket. I sat soaking my foot for at least 3 hours. This was an old folk remedy that was supposed to help keep down infection and blood poison. The next morning, after my older siblings got off to school and all the chores were done, some sacrifice was made for me to be treated by the doctor, since my wound was so deep. After all, it would be cheaper than a funeral. The first commandment created by the Great Depression was, Thou shalt not spend money except to prevent death. Even though many poor people had broken this commandment, Mother and Daddy had not had a situation in which they had to make this choice. They had been fortunate to be able to have and raise 6 children without spending much money. Mother loaded me and started to see old Dr. DeWitt Allred in Collins. She stopped at school and picked up my two oldest siblings, Oline and Joe, and I would soon find out why. When we stepped inside the doctor's office, the antiseptic smell sent chills over my body and fright into every molecule of it. I started crying. Oh, I hated Dr. Allred. He was so ugly and rough. I had been to his office 2 or 3 times before, and each time he came out of his inner sanctum all stooped over with his thumbs making horns on top of his head, butting at me like a billy goat. There was humor in his intentions that I failed to recognize. All I could see were the soup bowl-sized dark circles around his eyes and the folds of loose skin that rippled down his face, making him look just like one of Uncle Mart's old red-boned hound dogs. Well, he did it again. He seemed to delight in dragging me from behind a waiting room chair. I was convinced that he would break my arms if I did not allow him to drag me inside his office. Mother said that he was the best doctor in the world. She had confidence that he could cure anything. And I knew that Mother's always right, but I was afraid. He grabbed me up and strapped me to an examining table in his office. Oline stood on one side of me and Joe on the other. Both were holding me down to keep me from breaking the leather straps. Mother was holding down my head. I screamed as loud as I could, I thought, until Dr. Allred penetrated my foot with what I believed to have been a crochet needle, and then I discovered that my screamer's full voice came out. Dr. Allred inserted a strip of gauze through my foot along the path that the spike had made. He cut the skin on top of my foot so he could take both ends of the gauze and saw it back and forth. He didn't really saw the gauze, but that's what it felt like. A big slap on my rump prepared a tense muscle for a tetanus shot. Dr. Allred had a glass cabinet full of syringes. He had picked up the longest one for that shot. Then he picked up a tiny syringe and filled it with penicillin. He said it was a new miracle drug that had been discovered and would keep down infection. When he slapped my rump on the other side, I lost my breath. Had he changed needles? That shot went all the way to the bone. My breath re-entered my lungs, going full blast through my vocal cords. Oline and Joe carried me to the car while Mother went to Clayton's drugstore and got the prescriptions filled for the pink and brown medicine. No matter what was wrong with a person, Dr. Allred always prescribed a bottle of pink and a bottle of brown medicine. The pink had a Pepto-Bismol taste, and the brown tasted like dirt. I knew because I had tasted dirt. I had to stay in bed for several weeks while my wound healed, and each day was a home version of the visit to the doctor. Some of my sisters would hold me down and hold my foot up so Mother could pull out a smidgen of the gauze. The gauze served as a drain. My foot healed from the top down. In due time, all that remained was a scar on top of my foot and some bad memories. The end.